Good evening, everyone, and a heartfelt welcome to our online panel discussion addressing the vital subject of gender-sensitive urban planning. We gather here on this World Town Planning Day 2023, and I would like to express our gratitude to the ITPI Kerala chapter for their trust in the Women's Cell, recently established under ITPI Kerala Regional Chapter to host this event. This year's theme is Learn Globally, Apply Locally, and will focus on the value of learning from planning and planning cultures globally, fostering innovative, sustainable, and equitable solutions to address global challenges. We regret to inform you that, due to unforeseen circumstances, Dr. Sharmila Mary Joseph, Principal Secretary LSGD, Government of Kerala, who had kindly agreed to deliver the introductory remarks, is unable to attend the session. In her absence, we extend our sincere gratitude to her for accepting our invitation. Nonetheless, we are fortunate to have three distinguished members on our panel: Architect Banashri Banerjee, IPL expert; Professor Dr. Ashok Kumar, Professor of Physical Planning at SPA Delhi; and Professor Dr. Priyanjali Prabhakaran, Professor and Head, Department of Architecture and Planning, CET. We are also delighted to introduce Dr. Shailaja Nair, retired professor from the Department of Architecture and Planning, CET, and the convener of ITPI Women's Cell, who has accepted the role of our session moderator. A warm welcome to you as we begin the session. Without further ado, let's transition to the agenda for the evening. I would like to invite Srimati Shahna Rashid to provide an overview of today's program. Shahna.
Warm good evening to all esteemed members of ITPI Kerala Regional Chapter, distinguished guests, and all participants joining us today. It is with great pleasure and enthusiasm that I welcome you all to today's online program organized by the ITPI Kerala Regional Chapter under the dynamic leadership of the Women's Cell. Our focus today is a topic of paramount importance: gender-sensitive urban planning. Urban planning has always played a pivotal role in shaping the way our cities and towns function, and its impact is far-reaching. But as we start this journey, it is imperative that we acknowledge that urban planning has not always been as inclusive and equitable as it should be. The time has come for us to address these issues head-on and work towards more gender-sensitive urban environments. The concept of gender-sensitive urban planning is rooted in the recognition that cities and towns are not gender-neutral spaces. They affect women, men, and non-binary individuals differently, and these disparities have tangible consequences on our daily lives. Today's event seeks to shed light on these disparities, understand the challenges faced by different genders, and explore solutions to create urban spaces that are more inclusive and supportive for all. Our distinguished panel of experts will share their insights, experiences, and ideas on how we can make our cities more welcoming and empowering for everyone. Through open and informed discussions, we aim to discover innovative strategies and best practices that can serve as a blueprint for gender-sensitive urban planning. We encourage all participants to actively engage, share your thoughts, and take inspiration from this event to implement gender-sensitive urban planning in your own areas of influence. So, without further ado, let us start this insightful journey towards a more inclusive and equitable urban future. Once again, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Shahna, for that crisp and clear introduction. It is my pleasure now to invite planner Devika Hemalata Devi to provide a concise introduction to our esteemed panel members and the moderator for today's discussion.
Thank you, Induma. Good evening, everyone. Before we begin our panel discussion, I shall be briefly introducing our speakers for today. Architect Banashri Banerjee is an architect, urban planner, researcher, and teacher. She has had an enriching career spanning more than 4 decades in countries as diverse as India, Egypt, Korea, Myanmar, Philippines, and Bangladesh. Banashri ma'am's work illustrates her core commitment to participatory and inclusive planning, notably in her projects in Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and West Bengal. Her integrated planning manual for the government of Myanmar underlines several gender-related themes that hold valuable insights for us today. Our second speaker for today is Professor Dr. Ashok Kumar, a planning stalwart, presently serving as Professor of Physical Planning at the School of Planning and Architecture, SPA Delhi. His core interests on the politics of inclusive planning, Senian capability approach, and spatial justice bring a new dimension to our panel discussion today. Additionally, he has contributed to international research in Scotland, France, and Norway. Dr. Kumar is extensively published and has written and edited books on participatory planning and planning education. His latest is Routledge's title, Sustainable Developmental Goals and Indian Cities, Inclusion, Diversity, and Citizens' Rights. Our third speaker, Professor Dr. Priyanjali Prabhakaran, is a lifelong learner and career academician. Her contributions to Kerala's planning scenario are a tour de force. She is presently head of the Department of Architecture and Planning of the illustrious College of Engineering, Trivandrum, and coordinator of the Gender Justice Forum there. She is also the principal investigator of the Barrier-Free Consultancy Cell, which aims to improve accessibility in the built environment by providing technical support, creating awareness, and conducting research. A huge thank you and a warm welcome to our speakers for taking the time to be part of our online panel today. Today's panel would be incomplete without an introduction to our moderator, Dr. Shailaja Nair, Executive Committee member of the Women's Cell, Institute of Town Planners India, Kerala Regional Chapter. She retired as professor from College of Engineering, Trivandrum after 22 years of service and is teacher to many of us joining in today. Her contributions to themes such as environment behavior, environment studies, climate responsive and cost-effective design, and inclusive design, and inclusive to her work. Baker. Thank you, ma'am, for agreeing to steer what promises to be a very informative panel discussion on this occasion of World Town Planning Day 2023. I invite Dr. Shailaja Nair to her duties as moderator and request her to initiate the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Devika Hemlata. Good evening to one and all. A special welcome once again to our speakers. Let me explain how the session is going to be. First, in order of presentation would be Banashree ma'am, and then Dr. Ashok Kumar, and our third speaker would be Dr. Priyanjali Prabhakaran. Each of the panel members have 15 minutes to share their presentation, their thoughts, and I understand that they have PPTs and will be sharing it with us. And my duty also involves, if you're going beyond the allotted time, I may have to intervene and tell you that as much as we'd like to listen, maybe we can have more of a discussion later during the interactive discussion session. So, Banashree ma'am, I invite you to start the session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shailaja, for inviting me for this panel. And thanks a lot to Shehnaz and Devika for the introductions, which makes things easier. I will now try to share my screen. I should go into the presentation mode, which, just a minute. What's happened? I'm not able to go into the presentation. Yeah?
Ma'am, we can see it on screen. I think maybe you could go to full screen mode.
Yeah, I want to go into the presentation mode. So which, I don't know what's happened. I can't do that.
Actually, on the bottom right.
On the bottom right?
Yeah.
Yes. Next one. The one to the right. To the right. Once more, to the right. Yes,
yeah, okay. Oh, thank you very much for the technology help. Okay. So, yes, so gender sensitive urban planning. Now, the first thing is, how do we interpret gender sensitive urban planning? Yeah. Now, different people have interpreted it in different ways. One could be the feminist perspective, where we are talking only about women. But here, what I propose to do is to look at gender as women, men, trans, not only in a biological definition, but also a social cultural definition. Then, when we talk about gender sensitive, it means various things, which can be incorporating gender perspectives, voice, choice, roles, responsibilities, etc. And the recognition of the different needs, preferences of women and men in urban spaces is what matters. And to create cities, ultimately, that are inclusive, safe, accessible for all genders. So that being my interpretation and a lot of other people's of, gender sensitive or gender responsive planning, let's go ahead. What I will share with you is first some a broad brush of, what has been the efforts internationally and in India, some examples. And then I will zoom in directly into the little bit of work that I've done in the Indian states as well as in Myanmar to foster a kind of a gender-sensitive approach. It's not necessary when we talk about urban planning that we talk only about master planning and statutory planning. As you know, that there are many kinds of planning and that happen in cities. So we will take, yes? Was there some?
Slides are not moving.
Slides are not moving. Are they moving now?
No,
yeah.
Okay.
So why are we talking about gender-sensitive urban planning? First of all, what we want to do is to examine and create pathways for gender awareness and capacity among planning practitioners. So that's a huge thing, which perhaps Dr. Ashok Kumar will take on much more. And then the whole thing about when we start planning, many times we find that gender disaggregated data is not available. So how to generate that data? And then also looking at the diversity of gender participation, that is just not one way, but many ways and many levels that we can look at. And finally, what are the policies that support this? Does our legislation support this, or it's not required to be supported by legislation? And is there political will and commitment to look at this whole business of the gender lens for planning? So first of all, I'll just give an example of some efforts. At the international level, some guides have been brought out in the last 10 years. You have UN Habitat as well as the World Bank, which are in the forefront of this. And the key issues that are addressed in these guides are basically what I could find is three main things. One is looking at gender disaggregated statistics and availability of qualitative information for planning. The second is that how do we get into gender analysis and participation to support planning? And the third is gender-sensitive indicators by which planning can be evaluated. So these are broadly the things that these, and at different levels, and that these international guides are talking about. Now coming home to India, and then of course there are cities like Seoul and Vienna and others. They've done a lot of work, and but let's look at what's happening here. Now, we find that the draft development plan, the regional plan for Mumbai for 2034, has a whole chapter which is looking at this issue of the gender dimension. And basically with the idea of getting away from the so-called gender blindness that planning has. And this was kind of instigated by activists in Mumbai. So a whole chapter was included to achieve gender parity in the workforce, housing, transport, and education, and so on. And the recommendations of this chapter are measures for improving healthcare, safety, and so on. But so far, it has not really been implemented. So let's see what happens with it later. Then coming to Delhi, that the specific issue, which can then be taken up also as part of this gender mainstreaming in planning, is, in 2010, the Safe Cities Free of Violence Against Women and Child initiative was launched, and it was supposed to be taken up by Delhi government. It was basically, led by this NGO called Jagori, which did all these kind of safety audits of different places in Delhi, as you can see on the right. Women can get an access to services and other things, and can approach local government, then everybody can. So the poor woman in the slum became the kind of target or the subject for looking at. So what we're talking about is a project which was looking at providing services for the poor, and also, of course, then you would need to consider citywide services, pro-poor municipal reforms, and a role for civil society in this whole thing. Now, the unifying thing was a municipal action plan for poverty reduction, which also inspired later the city development plan of JNNURM. And it contains the municipality's strategy and proposals for slum upgrading, poverty reduction, and pro-poor municipal reform. And it is very important. It is prepared with the participation of local stakeholders, and a whole lot of participatory structures were set up at different levels. And as you would see, that at every level, the existing women's group, the City Development Society, the CDS, the neighborhood committees, the structures not different from what you have, the Kutumbashree structures that you have in Kerala. Now, they were involved at different levels, in working groups, in committees and task forces as part of this whole thing, as well as NGO representatives who were largely women representatives, and of course the lady councillors who were involved. And the whole thing was made very easy in terms of a whole lot of participatory kind of methods, which were in a way kind of straitjacketed, but different towns took them on in different ways. So a series of workshops, then strategy formulation, micro planning, in which women's groups were all involved in the whole thing. Now, one of the key things for targeting was to see, how to prioritize. So you can see that, the resident community volunteers putting lane maps together, and the spatial routing of participatory planning happened, at the micro level through this, and then people then could understand very well the spatial dimension of cities. And you can see that looking at this micro level brought out the differences and diversities in cities, slums, and generated different solutions which were very much locally determined rather than top-down kind of solutions. So the key strategies which were used in this project was to build up the municipalities as anchor institutions. Yeah, the 74th constitutional amendment, still wants the municipalities to anchor planning, but then how does it happen? Yeah. Then what was very important is working through and developing the capacity of existing community structures, that is mainly women's structures, but then also the residents' associations in the middle class areas as well. Then a participatory planning process at the city level, which was simple in the beginning and became more complex. And another thing was, this gender disaggregated information, which is spatially referenced, is totally lacking, to gradually bring that, build that up also. Then safety audits of neighborhoods, and where did women feel safe and where they felt unsafe. So then taking measures like development of streets, open spaces, and public spaces accordingly. Then community mapping, which I've already talked about, to identify needs, really anchored these needs of women to space, and that is important. Now,
ma'am, Banashri ma'am, we were really looking forward to hearing your Myanmar experience also, but it is time, in the interest of keeping to time, but could you tell us more about, more compactly about the Myanmar experience?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
as you can see from this, and of course this presentation will be accessible to you, that it was not a cakewalk. The experience was mixed, and we find that it takes a long time to root these kinds of approaches in cities. Coming to the Myanmar experience. Here again, I was team leader in a team that was helping Myanmar government to develop a manual, which was to accompany the government's draft law for regional and urban planning. Yeah. So, but then, of course, the military coup took place, and then nothing happened after that. But we did prepare the manual, and then we piloted it in 3 of the towns and finalized it on that basis. The outputs are the master plan, or the conceptual plan, as they call it, and strategic action plans, which are area-based or theme-based. And the cross-cutting themes across were social inclusion and, resilience to climate change. And you can see that this really was the conceptual part: inclusive growth, sustainable development. So inclusive meant, human resources and social development, in which gender was very much part of this whole thing. Now, this again is the whole process of how ultimately we ended up with 2 products, which is the conceptual or the master plan, and then the strategies or action plans for implementation, which directly go into projects. And this was then, the whole thing went in stages, like all planning processes, and with the participation of different structures which were created for this. And in the manual, what we had is a process manual, toolkit with various kinds of tools to aid this participatory process, then technical guides, and so on. Yeah. So, and then what we did was that along with the planning department, we went through an extensive process of stakeholder analysis, which gave us an idea of who would play what kind of role at which level in the planning and implementation process. So you can see the extensive groups, women's groups included here. And then at the city level, there was these structures which were created, in which you had the General Administration Department, which actually looks after cities, and then a steering committee, which consisted of citizens, also eminent ladies there, and a planning task force, which would be mainly responsible for planning, but then with inputs from different citizens group. And the Department of Urban and Housing Development is basically facilitating the whole process. Now, this ward level community mapping really became the building block for town diagnostics, for planning, monitoring, and evaluation. And that was, led by the ward administrators, and then because of the lack of information, it was really different groups in the ward that went lane to lane and house to house and collected information and put together a profile. Another thing which was very useful is that as part of the planning process, we built scenarios for the future of the town. And this there was a gender evaluation of the scenarios. And, just as so different scenarios were rated differently by men and women. The red one is a really bad one, and the dark blue is really good. And you can see that there's a lot of, there is some disagreement between the various scenarios. Now, I'll just take an example of housing, where universally women preferred, housing in mixed use areas, whereas men wanted more of segregated housing areas. So that was a major difference. And women, for the sake of safety, convenience, and so on, they preferred mixed-use development. Then the gender analysis matrix, I'm just picking up bits out of it and presenting it. So you know that you can use various kinds of techniques which are available for actually making this whole process more objective. Yeah. So from these experiences, what are the implications? So I think the major implication is to make a shift from planning as a technical activity to a socio-technical processes. Yeah. So planners need to facilitate social processes and generate technical solutions based on needs, aspirations, and priorities of people. Then ensuring representation of stakeholders and creating representative structures. Then building a capacity for the community to voice what they feel. And then again, for planners to plan through a gender lens, look at the requirements of men, women, trans, children, girls, all that. And then again, fostering participation and alliances with different groups like NGOs and forming participatory structures. And what, like even the international organizations talk about, gender analysis, disaggregated data, and gender-sensitive indicators. So, so the shift in planning is something to make planning more inclusive and gender, sensitive. So, thank you very much. Sorry, I've taken up more time, but yeah. But I hope
thank you, Manishri ma'am. Your talk was very interesting, and especially refreshing to see the number of policies and interventions that master planning and and policy level. And especially, it was even more interesting to see your direct experiences in the field. I'm sure we would like to listen to much more, especially a Myanmar experience. And I'm very sure the participants are going to ask you more questions on this. We'll circle back to you again once more. Thank you, ma'am. I now invite Dr. Ashok Kumar to share his expertise in this field. Welcome, sir.
The slides. Can you see the slide and can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for providing this opportunity. I'm happy to be in minority on the panel today. I want to add two more points to this. One, that Delhi Development Authority, since the last several years now, we have two commissioner planning who are female, and I hope that tradition continues longer. That is one. Second, in my own classes in the university, now we have almost 50-50 distribution of students.
Excuse me, would all the participants please mute? Please continue, sir.
Yeah. So I was starting with the two positives. One, that in DDA changes in the planning department, changes have taken place, and the current commissioner planning in the DDA are female. Second, in my own classes, particularly at bachelor's level, I see half the class are female now in comparison to the classes when I was studying at SPI in the late 80s. Most of us were men at that time. With these two points, this is how I'm organized today. I will talk a bit about gender. Banishri has already covered a lot of ground in her presentation, so I will quickly move on. Then I will identify a few of the women's planning concerns. And since I come from planning theory side, so I will talk about a bit of theory, particularly gender planning tradition in planning, and then conclude. So my sense of gender is that it is about behaviors, expectations, and norms, confronting each group, men, women, others. And these behaviors, expectations, norms, roles, etc. are socially constructed and also relationally constructed. These behaviors, etc., don't make any meaning if they are not related to one another. So relational aspect of gender is very important. These could be actual or perceived differences in behaviors, expectations, norms, roles, etc. So I view gender in that particular way where relational and socially constructed perspectives are important. I have identified 8 of these planning concerns where we can make some intervention as city planners or regional planners. These are safety in the city, decision-making in planning, accessibility, mobility. And I will talk about that men make and plan the urban public spaces, feminization of poverty, and different faces of women. First on safety in the city. in the cities that we live, you will be surprised, perhaps not, that on average for 53 large cities, we have data, 22 rapes per lakh population occur. This is a large number. And if we talk about specific cities, Gwalior and Delhi even have larger figures as far as rapes and violent crimes are concerned. And Delhi, in Delhi, number of rapes in Delhi has almost doubled between 2012 and 2013 from 580. And then Delhi is followed by Mumbai and Jaipur and Pune. These are top unsafe cities, also known as the Sin City, are spread all over India. Coimbatore is the best one. Now, why this is happening? There are several reasons. I have identified a few. Lack of reliable and affordable public transit systems. Now, governments, state governments as well as central government, they are working on this, and particularly Metro has contributed. I have a view on this, that why should women be excluded when people who conduct themselves inappropriately can use, don't understand why this of reservation of a coach for women. On the same issue, then there are even more important issues where we can directly make interventions. We all know women and female child in slums, they're particularly vulnerable. Women disproportionately suffer when we talk about resettlement and rehabilitation. They not only lose employment for longer period of time during displacement, look after children, and other activities in the household. On decision making, we generally find women have some important decision making arenas. Town and country planning organizations are a case in point, including the central organization located in Delhi. Like I said, Delhi Development Authority, some changes have taken place. Time will tell whether more women can occupy this top position. Institute of Town Planners, sadly, still we don't have a woman president. Similarly, School of Planning and Architecture, at least Delhi, in Vijayawada, we had a woman director, but in Delhi, which is the oldest one, we still are waiting for a woman director in SPA Delhi. A survey was conducted of a number of universities, and we found 3% female vice chancellors. I don't have the latest data. This is slightly older data. On accessibility, John Friedman, called the father of modern planning, why less accessibility to various sources. He talks about, and he says, we are locking ourselves into the prison of our own fears, that men has certain presumed fears of women. So that is why they are not allowed to be in spaces which could be more accessible to them. In those spaces, we can count religious places. I have myself seen in Kashmir, in a mosque, this was happening, but I don't want to get into the specific religion. All religions have to answer on this. Then I talked earlier about ghettoization of women in the metro. Chennai's public bus services. I visited Chennai and I was really surprised that a huge steel rod is placed in the middle of the bus, and men are on one side and women are on the other side. I don't know what these kind of strategies, how they really stop any crimes against women. Same case goes for Mumbai local trains. Also, I don't know the current situation about Mumbai particularly. On mobility, mobility impacts everything. Mobility is really life, and it does impact economic participation. Banishri also talked about mixed land uses. We conducted survey where we also found that separation of land uses hinders mobility of women, because generally we don't understand the nature of women's trips. These trips are very different from men's trips. Men's trips are a very regular kind of thing, from home to the job and back home during the working days at least. Women's trips are rather erratic because they have to look after so many other things, particularly care activities. And of course, absence of caregiving facilities in the institutions. Men make the urban. All of us know, and we have studied as students, what is a census town, and these are the criteria that Census of India applies. One thing, third criteria, which says at least 75% of the male main working population. Male main version engaged in non-agricultural pursuits. It can not a town. I don't know why male and why not everyone else included, and why only non-agricultural pursuits to call a certain settlement urban, because again, this also impacts female who are largely engaged in activities. Dwarka is the case conducted survey here in Dwarka. This is now 1.25 million settlement. Here, my colleagues, when they were doing planning, we were studying in SPS, so we used to go to see how they do it, and most of the staff employed there who were preparing plans for Dwarka were men, largely men. And once we got the plan, again, separation of land uses here at large scale, which resulted, and this was one of the findings of the survey, non-driver women depend on husbands or their children, because this matter has come just prior to that. Women generally depended on their husbands or children for mobility purposes. And this whole study got published in a handbook of planning theory, published by Routledge in 2017. Public spaces are shrinking.
Sir, I have to remind you, your time is nearing.
Okay. So theory part I will not talk about. Let me just finish the 8 concerns that I have outlined. Public spaces are shrinking because of privatization. Malls, other entertainment spaces, again, construct of women as well as children, feminization of unpaid caregiving work is is generally undertaken by women, reproductive work of women, and cultural obligations of women looking after parents and in-laws. Men and women are only 23.3%, whereas men take the major chunk in men workers. This is Census of India 2011. This is just a graph showing and contribution of women as part of the work is declining over the at all India level. Well, if we talk about their needs are very different. One is these are the women, and second one is this one, Nisaba Godrej, Executive Director of Godrej Consumer Products. Their needs are highly different, and policies has to be different. So because of constraints of time, I will skip the theory part of it, and we can discuss when it comes to discussion. Just the last two slides, Chair. We have, what can we do really? What is possible as a plan? So in our hand, we only have development plans, development control activities. We need to discuss directly. We are not just all the plans that you have nowadays. Emphasis is on GIS rather than gender or any other social identity indicators. Then what can we do about identification of needs itself is an issue, but that is possible. What are our priorities? Care services versus car parking, let's say. Which one is to be taken first? Or how much space in the city should be allocated for these activities? This needs to be thought through. And like I mentioned earlier, during displacements, resettlements, women suffer disproportionately more than anyone else. Concluding, one section is missed, so some conclusions may not directly come from the presentation. I'm arguing that add woman and steer method will not work. We need to particularly adopt gender planning tradition where we talk about equity, meaning fairness, equality, empowerment of women. Talk about practical gender needs. Those could be technical, like I talked about the design of a bus stand. Strategic gender needs, these are political needs. And and we talk about more empowerment of women by including them in the workforce. Thank you so much, Chair. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. For you have said so far. much more equitable manner. I now invite Dr. Priyanjali Prabhakaran to share her views on this topic. Ma'am,
Just a minute, let me get out.
Dr. Priyanjali?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start sharing.
Before you do, I have to get out of this. So
You have stopped sharing, sir. So is my presentation visible?
Yes.
no, I have to get out first. You see this?
No, sir, you have
You
exited
already
from
said.
presentation mode.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I'll just start. I would like to begin by saying that most of the points which I want to say have been covered by the earlier speaker. Women, of course, not everybody is taking decisions, and only 81% take decisions of their own healthcare, and like that. And at the end, you can see 11% of women participate in none of these decisions. So this has come from the National Family Health Survey. And another one, it says the ownership of assets. People who own a house, it is 42% for women and 60% for men. And owning land is also 32% for women and 42% for men. This is a much improved statistics, I think. Maybe in the previous years or maybe a decade before, this was not the case. Even the disparity was much larger. So these are some other things about literacy, about women with 10 or more years of schooling, and anemia. In all these, you can see that women are having a very negative role, or kind of they are not in a good position. So these are the things which make women more poorer than men. So usually people ask, why should we always think of women? What the kind of women we see are all employed and they have salaries, and why should we? But this is the statistics all over India. This is what it says. The condition of women is, of course, subservient to, or it is subordinate to men, and they are poorer and they use less of resources. So having said all this, I'll come back to this argument that cities are not just physical formations, and the social processes within the societies are related to the formation of physical forms that we see as cities. So social segregation and exclusion on the basis of ethnicity, religion, class, they are all spatially reflected. Similarly, gender segregation or gender exclusion, these are also spatially reflected. And cities are social structures where groups and interests accumulate and are represented. So spatial forms will be produced by human action and will express and perform the interests of the dominant class. Space will express and implement the power relations of the state. Spatial forms will be realized and shaped by gender denomination and state-enforced family life. So again, talking about gender and space, gender is one of the universal and fundamental characteristics which determine the role and status of individuals in the society. And gender roles and statuses will be manifested spatially. And according to in literature, it says city forms and structures and urban institutions created and reinforced women's dependence, consigned them to domestic arena and disabled them from fully entering the public life. So gender, talking about gender, gender is not just biological sex. Gender identifies the social relations between men and women. And gender refers to not to men or women, but to the relationship between them and the roles played by people. And gender roles are culturally determined, and gender relations have been studied in different societies, which say that there is variability. The gender role in a particular culture may be different in another, different from the role in another culture. And there have been tremendous changes in the social roles of men and women. Gender relations are contextually specific and often change in response to altering economic circumstances. And cities are traditionally conceived to be men's place. Women are excluded from the public, and usually women are seen as minority category existing in the private realm. And so due to the reproductive roles of women, and they are associated with the domestic sphere, and men are associated with the outside world due to their role as the economic providers. So all of these, all these things have resulted in the concept that the public realm is not for the women. Women's place is the home. It has been the important principle for architectural design and also for urban planning. So you can see that in the public realm is very important. It is the site and settings of public life, but usually women are seen as a illegitimate use. So it is important that the public realm is used by all, because it is the form for political action and representation. It's a neutral or common ground for social interaction, and it's a stage for social learning, personal development, information exchange. But a woman is always considered as not as a legitimate user. So women's mobility is usually restricted through imposition of patterns of movements, behavior based on fear and restricted access. And then socially, it is restricted through assumptions about women's role in the society. And usually everywhere, we see that women are advised to take caution. Ashok sir was also mentioning why women are excluded or women are segregated into certain areas for their safety. So they are asked to protect themselves. So women's domestic roles in separate homes and residential neighborhoods were seen to be the basis of restrictions. And with this context, if we look at planning, in planning also we consider the nuclear family as the smallest unit. That smallest unit, we make a stereotype of this nuclear family where there is a young male breadwinner and a female homemaker. And we assume that the homemaker will stay there taking care of the family, the children, the elderly. But in reality, families are very diverse. And there are many, if you go to statistics, definitely statistics says that there are several female-headed households and single women households. There are specific needs for such families, mainly because female-headed households will have less number of breadwinners, and they seem to be, they are poorer. And single women households are also poorer because they have many different types of vulnerabilities. So we have not started addressing their issues in planning. And this is one example when literature says that the suburbanization in American cities it has excluded women from the workforce. It comes from the notion that women's place is in the home. But we have this conventional urban planning where we have different zones where there are houses in a particular zone, markets and factories, separate locations. So such planning requires people to travel across town to work in another zone. But whereas women they adjust their different roles, their domestic roles as caregivers and homemakers, and they have to find time in between, and it is not possible for them to travel across towns to get their economic participation. So urban development and planning have tended to reflect and also reinforce these traditional assumptions about gender. So now we need to have a conscious effort to see that how women's employment is affected because of our planning, because of our zoning. So zoning and density very important. Most Indian cities are characterized by high density mixed use development. But when we impose planning, we make different zones, and women earlier they had some kind of opportunity to take part in family business, agriculture, and different activities. But by way of exclusive zoning, urban planning tend to deny such opportunities for participation in income generation. Some examples like, and talking about women and transport. Transportation planning considers women as housewives and men as the breadwinners and major users of all forms of transit. Men are the major users of all forms of transit. So we have peak hours. Peak hours will have more transport facilities. But women they may be adjusting their travel requirements as per their family requirements or their traditional roles. And they may be traveling in non-peak hours. So women are more, and of course, women are especially for women. When we talk about persons with disabilities, when we talk about elderly, all these vulnerable groups, these basic things are very important. Pedestrians or infrastructure for pedestrians or accessibility and basic infrastructure is very important. Whether you talk about women, whether you talk about elderly, or whether you talk about children or persons with disability, these things are very important. So better provision of public services like water, sanitation, electricity, safer roads can lighten the burden of many domestic tasks that women perform. And they can, if we have better public services, they can free the women, and there will be more women who are coming to education or jobs, and their and their families' health improves. So basic services support women's right to health, education, and a decent life. Poor women rely more than men on public services because they often do not have other options. And proper toilets and sanitation are not available in many communities. If we see the latest family health survey, also it says that there are a large proportion of people who do not have sanitation available, and women have to wait till dark to relieve them. So that leads to many health issues also. So lack of access to skilled healthcare providers and absence of medical facilities is also causing high maternal mortality rates. So physical difference to these different services, that is also a hindering factor. When people live near good roads, they are more likely to have access to emergency health care, or girls are more likely to attend schools. So availability of safe and affordable public transport is also a major factor. And then talking about safety, which was already mentioned, safety and fear of crime. When we have all these statistics about crime, what we have is we construct that the atmosphere of fear. So there is a perceived danger.
Participants, kindly mute your video.
So
Priyanjali ma'am, just to remind you, you have 3 minutes. No, please, thank you.
Okay. So perceived danger is one important thing. Like we perceive that there is going to be some danger, so people avoid. And always women are advised to avoid venturing into after dark or venturing into areas which are not known to them. So in these cases, definitely planning can do a lot of things. So while we plan for schools, and absence of toilets in school is one of the major reasons for dropout of girl children. And scholars have also studied the impact of services like childcare and food retailing on women's participation in the labor force. Like most of these things are available in cities. So when we had the new food ordering apps, it was they were in one way they were supporting women's participation in labor force also. And McKinsey points out that childcare service is a resource which structures the space-time pattern of women's domestic work, and it's fundamental in structuring the space and time of women's wage at work. We all see that in most of the highly paid job areas, even now, even in the highly paid the IT sector also, now they have started giving creches, but it was not the case. Something else will be the gym will be the first priority than giving a creche. But coming to lower paid lower paid jobs, women do not have much choices. They don't have good childcare facilities. So they have to be away from the employment sector for a long time to take care of their children. And or their children get into some very unsafe areas if their mothers go for work. Now we come to this another concept of right to the city. the right to the city is not just a simple visiting right. It is a, it has to, whoever is a citizen, they have a right to the city. But when we see women are not seen to be a right, to have a right to experience or appropriate the space or the city spaces. So public realm usually includes all the spaces, but participation is essential for attaining the
kindly
full
mute.
potential of an individual. So I'll just move to the next. So there are many UN conventions and all which say that talk about gender mainstreaming. I'll come to this. Gender mainstreaming is one thing where it is not just equality. So it talks about parity, equality, equity, empowerment, and transformation. So just giving equality is not enough. So we need to have parity, equal representation, then equality, equal access, control, opportunities, rewards, and benefits. And then we require equity, the equivalence of in life outcomes for women and men. And then empowerment. All these we have to ensure through empowerment, cognitive, behavioral, and affective changes, and through transformation. And when city systems can take care of the disadvantages and domestic responsibilities faced by women, they will be more able to participate in the public life of the city in a more productive manner. So cities can be built for accommodating the community support needs of women. Neighborhood designs with community kitchens and daycare centers, which will take care of the homemaker responsibilities of women through community participation, can enable women to engage in the formal workforce. Appropriate zoning and transportation planning can facilitate women to combine domestic responsibilities with wage labor. If we see any of the new cities which are being planned, we can see that again they are restricting people to housing areas, or there are clear zoning of different uses which do not think of these immediate requirements or the different alternative ways of income generation, which but not only by women, also by people who are aged, or by different types of groups like persons with disabilities. So we need to think of all these requirements in city planning. And, I'll just come to my an observation study which was conducted in participation of various user groups differ with physical environment, and women in the public realm maintain the social. So good toilets as the first steps that will improve the lives of the poorest of the poor women. So that could be the first step, but there are many things which can be done in planning. Of course, we can have any number of examples. I'll stop here. We can continue to have a discussion.
Thank you. Happy to see them. And I was that is a panel discussion between the members, but considering the time, and I'm sure this topic is of great interest to the participants, I'm opening the floor to our participants to ask questions. I think we have time for 6 questions and the reply by our speakers. So if you could raise your hands, we could take, I think, a maximum of 6 questions before we wind up the session. Do the participants have questions?
Yes, ma'am, I have, but I'm not being able to raise my hand.
Could you identify yourself?
Mona Lisa?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am, my question was to Dr. Banashri Banerjee. If she could go explain a little bit about the different methods they have used for participatory, more equal participatory stakeholder participation, consultative processes that she was talking about. If she could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Thanks for the question. There are different methods that we've used. And actually, the whole thing when we are talking about spatial planning is to connect, people with space. And there is where there are a lot of methods like, transact walk, for instance, that you walk together and you see what's wrong with your, settlement and things like that. The other is, and then also what you need, and together women and men, they figure out what kind of improvements they need. That's for existing areas. And we found that kind of thing works very well, where people are, deprived of a lot of services. But in middle class areas, people are hardly willing to even participate in these kind of exercises. So it has to be a different thing. So in middle class areas where you have these resident welfare associations, you have meetings where you insist that, ladies should also be present, and you can have, specific issue-based discussions and questions which you can ask them to reply to. And that kind of thing works pretty well. And then there are also these kind of focus group discussions you can have with just anybody. So there are a number of these participatory techniques, and mapping is a great tool where, even if you begin with the GIS-based map and then get everybody to identify their places, the city itself, what's happening in different places in the city. It takes time, but then I think if we are trying to get responses for spatial planning, then basing everything on maps and actual spaces in the city works very well. And there are several tools which have been developed by other disciplines like social work and sociology, which can be used quite effectively, and for planning and adapted for spatial planning. And that's what we've been trying to do. Even simple things like SWOT analysis and things is at times useful. So it all depends a lot on the context you're looking at, the participants that you have, and what kind of methods that you use. Sometimes it's role play and games and things like that also that are quite effective. Sometimes it's using maquettes, like actual models of places, where it's when you're trying to get people to visualize space and so on. So it's quite an interesting field, and developing pretty fast also, I think.
Are there any other questions?
Ma'am, I am Raji. I would like to ask to Ashok sir. Sir, you told about the public spaces. Is there any service level benchmark type of things to assess the existing scenario of public spaces, so that we could improve it? How first we need to understand how the existing public spaces are serving to all genders. So for that assessment, is there any type of service level benchmark being assessed or prepared?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Very important one. I don't have any yardsticks to propose, particularly for public spaces. But how these public spaces become accessible and are used by, first of all, public spaces are only available to a certain class of people, that is middle class and higher income groups. To others, public spaces, they don't have any spaces where they can. I'm thinking of parks, playgrounds, and so on. People living in slums don't have really access. So first of all, we need to think of how children, women, others can have access to these spaces. And particularly with the onslaught of privatization, these spaces, the existing spaces are even becoming scarce because we are putting a price to access public spaces. I do not really mean in terms of ownership. A mall is a public space for me, but to access this space, I must have a lot of money. So poor women perhaps may not be able to access those places. Similarly, other entertainment places. And suburbanization has greatly contributed to the shrinking of these spaces. But sorry, I don't have any recommendation to make at the moment what we can do really. And the only thing is we have to decide our priorities, whether we want to have more space under public spaces, which can be accessed by each and every one of us, including women, or we want to devote more space for under roads, let's say, or under parking spaces, or under commerce, other land uses. So I would think that the starting point is, you see, that we try and understand the needs of the women. When we do discuss at our school also, highly educated academic staff, they simply refuse to recognize. So starting point is there. You see that they don't even recognize that there are specific issues which needs to be addressed, and they are gender sensitive issues, and planners must be aware of those issues. So the first thing is, I'm slightly digressing from your question, that we need to create certain awareness in the academy itself, because we are training people, youngsters particularly, who will go into the field and prepare plans, enforce planning laws. They need to be aware of these issues. Yes. So this is my answer. I didn't quite answer your question, but these are my thoughts.
Okay, sir. Actually, I think as you said, the yardsticks are not yet in force. Actually, the awareness is the initial step. So let's see, sir, more interventions are coming this way.
Vanishri has written something. I think that is useful.
Yeah, I would like to add that definitely we have to follow the existing guidelines, like the IRC codes or the harmonized guidelines, which have to be enforced for all the public space that we have, the roads or the streets. If we can at least enforce that, that will ensure that people can at least, there is minimum walkability or minimum accessibility for everybody, and especially people who are there are the people like street vendors. So we need to address their issues. So the street vendor policy says that in master plans you have to demarcate areas for street vending, and definitely you should have facilities for them. So this is not happening in master plans. So this is one area where we can do the concerns of women.
Ma'am, I have a little doubt about that because master plans are prepared at a macro level, right? So is it possible to address these gender sensitive issues at a macro level? I mean, Banashree Madam has cited that by improving the inclusivity in planning process, we can bring about the gender aspects. But like walkability, that sort of things, I think we need to come up with a micro level plan.
But it should be addressed in the macro level itself. You should have proper pedestrian zones, and you should have proper street vending zones. So these enhance the employment opportunities for women. So that definitely we can do in master planning level. And of course, the distance between workplace and employment, that can be addressed.
We would have liked the question answer session to go on for some more time, but it's already past 7:30. I really think we need a separate session for this with more time for the speakers. But in the interest of making sure that the participants join us, because we finished in a timely manner, I hope to wind up the session now. Thank you, all the speakers. It was really a very interesting session, and I hope we'll all get together soon for another session. I'm winding up the session for now. Thank you for all the participants who asked questions. Indugita?
Yes, ma'am. So as we draw this thought-provoking discussion to a close, I would like to extend my invitation to Dr. Adira Ravi, Town Planner, Wayanad, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Indu. Good evening, one and all. Our topic of discussion, gender-sensitive planning, is crucial and progressive approach to urban planning that aims to create environments that are inclusive and accommodating for all genders. On behalf of the Women's Cell of ITPI Kerala Regional Chapter, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all of you for joining us on this special occasion, the panel discussion on the occasion of World Town Planning Day 2023. It was indeed a day filled with insightful discussions and valuable insights, and it would not have been possible without your active participation. Dr. Sharmila Mary Joseph IAS, we completely understand the official emergencies can arise unexpectedly. While circumstances prevented your participation this time, your willingness to be part of our event meant a lot to us. Thank you, madam. Your support is truly valued. We would like to express sincere thanks to our distinguished panelists, Architect Banashree Banerjee, Dr. Ashok Kumar, and Dr. Priyanjali Prabhakaran, who shared their expertise and knowledge in the subject of gender-sensitive planning, making the event informative and engaging. Your contributions were invaluable in shedding light on the various aspects of urban development and its importance in shaping the future of our communities. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Shailaja Nair for moderating the session. Ma'am, we appreciate the valuable insights you brought to the discussion. Special thanks to all eminent planners and all those present here who took the time to be part of this event, as your presence and enthusiasm make this event more memorable. A big thanks to the office bearers of ITPI KRC, led by Sri Rajesh PN, and our dedicated team in the KRC Women's Cell, led by Dr. Shailaja Nair and Dr. May Matthew. A special thanks is due to Srimati Raji SS, Secretary ITPI KRC, who was actively involved throughout in organizing this event. Also, I thank Sri Akhil PR, for support rendered for the conduct of this program. Let us take the insights gained from the today's discussions and use them to further enhance and contribute to the betterment of our towns and cities. We look forward to your continued engagement in our future events. Thank you once again for being part of the Town Planning Day 2023. We hope to see you again in our upcoming initiatives. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Atira. As we conclude today's event, I want to express my gratitude once again to each and every one of you for your support, and thank you for being a part of this program. Thank you.